Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of the Triangle Area SQL Server User Group's Business Intelligence and Data Science meeting. So we have with us a speaker, Weston Goodwin, who is going to talk to us about SQL Simulator, which is something that he's been working on in his office as a one-man startup shop for a little bit. So please, Weston, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So I'm going to share my screen here. Just give me one moment to get set up. And are you, and of course it always does that.
There we go.
Are you able to see it? Okay,
Yep.
great. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to view my presentation. We're going to talk today about the SQL Simulator and how to reduce costs and enhance security of database change management. A little bit about me. My name is Weston Goodwin. I've been a software developer for about 30 years. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm married. I have technically 3 kids. And I say technically because one of my kids is actually my sister. I got custody of her when she was about 12 when our mom died. And so I'm like 17 years older than her. And there are no children in between us. So like I've been was a single, basically only child for like 17 years, and then my mom told me 2 weeks before I graduated from high school that she was pregnant. So that was kind of interesting thing there. I like studying anthropology, which is the study of human relationships. I like pizza, and I dislike brown recluses. And that may seem a little odd, but my HVAC guy recently told me that I had several recluses underneath the house. So anyway, so I need to do something about them. All right. So why did I create this tool? Well, over the years, I've seen a lot of issues with the database change request system. Whenever you need to submit a SQL, in some shops you have where the DBAs are the ones that run your SQL scripts. So you can't actually run them against production. And so you submit these scripts and, sometimes they'll work, sometimes they don't. Um, I've seen issues with even, your non-production environments with multiple people trying to execute their scripts. There are issues that come out of this. So originally, when I first created this tool, a lot of people kind of brought up, security issues, right? Well, they weren't exactly, comfortable with kind of how it did some things. So I recently changed my focus to more focus on like the security aspect of it. And while doing some research with security, it seemed to me like a lot of the breaches that occur are because the hackers get like valid credentials. One of the breaches I'm aware of, a developer was logged into a dev database, and because he was logged in, a hacker was able to get control of his computer and then take all of the data that way. And so, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I develop something that can at least curb or reduce how much data gets accessed by a hacker? Um, One of the things that our company did was um, they hired a consulting company that did like a phishing attack against the users. And it was very interesting to see like how many people put their actual username and password in this fake. They set up a email, and then they set up a fake URL, and just how many people were willing to. Sorry about that. How many people were willing to just give their information over very easily? And so it's like you can come up with all the things you want to in the world in terms of security, but if you have people giving away their user ID and password, that's not going to help very much. Um, and so there's also another attack that I learned about. It's called an evil twin attack. So with the evil twin attack, what'll happen is, let's just say, somebody is like they learn about your the company you work for, and the company you work for has a Wi-Fi, and people access that Wi-Fi. Well, what they can do is they can set up their own Wi-Fi adapter. They can basically overrun the current Wi-Fi adapter that's there, and they can set up a Wi-Fi that looks the name looks just like your company's name, and then you connect to that Wi-Fi, and then they're able to really control like where you go on the internet. So you may try to go to your bank account, your bank website, and they can take you to another website that looks just like it. And you enter in your username and password. So these guys have all kinds of ways to get username and passwords. Um, and so it's just been really an interesting thing to learn about. Are there any questions so far?
There are no questions so far, but anybody, if you have questions, drop them in chat and I'll ask away.
Okay, great. Okay, so what is SQL Simulator? So the first thing it does is it's a tool that uses Kubernetes to create disposable databases. These databases destroy themselves after 15 minutes of non-use. And by using Kubernetes as a database proxy, you can restrict users to one account. And so through this presentation, I'll show you kind of like how all that works together. And for those that are unfamiliar with Kubernetes, it's basically used to run and manage containers. You've probably seen, ads about containerized applications. So it's one of the tools that people use to do that. And you'll hear a couple of terms like a pod is basically a collection of containers. You can think of them as like temporary servers. And then you'll hear like node, which is basically multiple pods on a physical server. So it's like a way to be able to run multiple servers in like a single server. And that's, just kind of a very high level overview of Kubernetes. Okay, so the business case number one for this is to be able to prevent the entire database from being exposed. Basically, instead of giving developers and users access to the entire production database, you can restrict them to just one account. Um, and the database will destroy itself after a period of non-use. Um, this is like really important for things like if somebody breaches one of these temporary databases, they'd only get like one account versus like the entire database. And that's like important for things like because if you have a data breach, you have to have you have to offer the people that were breached like credit monitoring that will reduce the cost of that, and also prevents negative news about your company. So essentially, like a lot of states have a threshold for reporting, right? So let's just say you have a database and there's only like one account in this database. Um, then you still have to notify the individual, but what you don't have to do is notify these consumer reporting agencies. So if, for example, you have a customer they live in Virginia, but your company, it's not about where your company is located, it's about where the person is located that's affected. So for example, in Virginia, we have a threshold of 1,000 people. So you could set this up so like even if you needed 10 or access to 20 accounts at a time, you still want to make sure that however much you give to people is under that threshold. All right. So at a high level, how does SQL Simulator work? So the first thing you'll do is you'll create a pod inside of Kubernetes. You'll add, once you create the pod, you'll add files via a web interface. You run the simulator, and then you review the database results inside of the pod. All right. Are there any questions before I continue?
Nope, go for it.
Okay, great. So the best way to think about how this tool works is to think about what you would have to do manually if you wanted to test a SQL script against production. For example, so we have three functions here. We have a database post view merge, a database preview merge, and then we have dry runs. So I'll first talk about the database post view merge. And so what you have is, like, for example, you have your update. So you say you got update employee set type equals R, where employee ID equals 1. So if you thought about what you would have to do to test that against production, you would manually you make sure that, okay, this table that's in production, it exists in my development database. And then you would copy the records from production to your development database, and then you would run your SQL script against your development database. So it basically automates what you would have to do in order to test something. So we'll go into a little bit more of a detail here. So on your left in the yellow here, you have an update statement. And the first thing it's going to do is figure out what the tables are in your SQL script. And then it's going to go to production and get a copy of that table's DDL. And then it's going to create that table inside of the pod. The next thing it will do is it's going to convert that update statement to a select all using your where clause. And then it's going to go to production, retrieve that data, and then copy that into the pod. And then the last thing it will do is it's going to run your SQL script against the pod so that you can see the result of your SQL script. So we just went over the database post view merge. So the database preview merge is like the post view merge. The only difference is it does not run the SQL script against the pod. So for example, if you wanted to see like what a delete statement would do, like, is it going to delete the records I think it's going to delete? You will be able to see that if you do the preview merge. If you do a post view merge with a delete statement, it's going to just, there's not going to be, it won't show you anything because it will have deleted all those records. And then the dry run is basically like it's similar to the post view merge. The only difference is it gets rid of all of the objects in your SQL script. So it runs through everything and it will report to you if there was an error with something, and then it will destroy everything at the end. All right. So one of the things that you can do with this system is you can set constraints on your SQL statements. And so this gets into, you have a sensitive data constraint, and this is basically a table that you set up in the database. And you say, you enter the record and you say sensitive data, and there's a comma delimited column inside of here. And the first column is like SSN, that's like the type of sensitive data you want to put a constraint on. The second value is the table name. The third value is the column. The fourth value is whether or not you want to allow, do you want the user to have to recreate the pod every time they retrieve a certain number of SSNs from production? And then the last value is how many unique SSNs you allow somebody to retrieve. So if you wanted to allow a user to retrieve 100 at a time, you can set this value to 100. If you just want it 10 at a time, you set it to 10. And so this is just one way that in which you can restrict the amount of data that leaves your database. Okay, and so another thing that you can do is set constraints on a query plan metric. So like, the number of rows that can be retrieved at a time, and then the amount of data or the size of the data. You can set a constraint on that as well. Any of these constraints, if you need to override them, can be overridden with permission from the DBA. So so if you need more than what this provides, there's a way to do that. You just have to go through the DBAs to do it. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the roadmap of some things that are coming up in the future. Soon is, like I talked about, being able to the pod will self-destruct after a period of non-use. The next thing is an audit limit policy. So what that would be is to say, okay, I only want to let developer A, you can only get 20 unique SSNs per day, right? Or you can get 50 SSNs per day. And once you reach that limit, you can no longer retrieve any new social security numbers for that day. Um, and so this is like another thing that can be used to limit, again, how much data somebody gets. So if for example, you set a policy and it's like 10 SSNs per day, um, and the developer may only use 7 or 8 of them, or they may use 5 of them. They go to lunch, they come back and they can't use any of them. That would be a red flag that, hey, we may have we may have been compromised, because the amount of records that people can, or the amount of accounts people can get, are low enough to where it becomes apparent that there's something wrong. Because one of the issues you have with security is just there's just all this data going around, and it's hard to know whether or not something is a false positive or not. And so this would be a way to know that, okay, again, people can only get X amount of records, and if they're hitting that and they know they haven't touched anywhere near that, that's a flag for you. You can also you'll also be able to do code reviews, automated code reviews on your SQL scripts. So you can have things where your SQL statements have to contain a where clause, and that where clause has to have indexes or primary keys or row limit, or you limit the amount of records that can be retrieved. You can also do things like backup tables. So if you were to do an update or a delete statement, you also want to have a backup table. And that backup table has to appear before your update or delete statement. You can also enforce referential integrity for tables that don't have foreign keys. So, for example, you may have like business objects, and you may have a transaction table. And although there's no foreign key there, those tables need to be in sync. And you might have to delete something from the transaction table. So you want to say, okay, well, if I delete from table A, I also have to delete from table B. So it's a way to, get into the data quality aspect, to make sure that if people are manually updating anything in your database, that gets taken care of. And then right now, this tool is available for SQL Server. I will be doing Oracle, Postgres, and MySQL as well. Do we have any questions in the comments?
So no questions so far.
Okay. Okay, and then on this screen, this is more of the networking aspect. So when I talk about the constraints, essentially what I'm saying is that you're going to use the Kubernetes cluster as a database proxy to your production database. So essentially, nobody will be able to connect directly to production. What you'll do is you'll run SQL Simulator. It will create a database for you inside of this Kubernetes cluster, and then the users will connect to this, but they will not connect to the database. So you can use like SSMS to connect to these databases. It works just like a normal database. They're just temporary. And so when you create the pod, you put your SQL scripts via the web interface in this pod, and then you run it. It runs through this constraint table, and then it goes to production and retrieves the data. And as long as you are within the limits that are set by the constraints, it'll build the database for you, and you connect directly to the cluster. But nobody has direct access to production. The only exceptions would be like applications that have system accounts. So those would be on the other side of this cluster. Um, So your firewall would be set up to where it rejects IP addresses from everything except for application servers that have system accounts and the K8 cluster. But nobody would have direct access to the database anymore. Um, are there any questions about this?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So the business case number two would be because of the way Kubernetes is set up, you can essentially run 16 test servers, 16 to 32 test servers for the price of like one server. So because it splits up your server into several servers at once, and because SQL Simulator only gives you what you need to test, you can basically have more servers to test with because you need less data to test with. So that's essentially how that works. Okay, so that's pretty much the presentation. I'm going to now just show you a demo of the software itself. Um, so the first thing I mentioned is that you have to create a pod. I'm going to show you, there's a couple commands that you use to do that. Right now, I'm just doing a change directory to go to the correct directory I need. Um, you're going to run this command, kubectl apply -f, and then the name of a YAML file, and you'll see you'll get this return statement that says the pod has been created. Um, Generally, it doesn't take long to create these pods, usually 20-30 seconds. I'm going to check the status of them, see if it was created. Okay, it says it's running. All right, so now the next thing that I'm going to do is port forwarding to go to that pod. So now it's telling me it's going to accept my URL request. So once I set that up, the next thing I'm going to do is go to a web browser and do localhost, and it's going to bring me to this screen. It's called pod initialization. And so essentially what this will do is it's used to basically set up your username and password into the database and to change the default password that is used when creating these images, these containers. And I'll show you when this is running, I'll show you the script used to create the container. But I need to put in this password. Let me see. Okay, so once that container has been, the disposable database has been initialized, you'll click on SQL scripts, and we're going to choose a SQL script to run. Let me see. Okay, and it recognized this script, and we click on SQL Simulator, and we click on data sources, and we're going to add a data source. And there are two sections under the data sources. There is the source database, and then there's the pod database. So I'm going to put in information for the source here. Okay, I'm going to save that, and then I'm just going to come in and test it. Okay, so the login is okay. Now we're going to do a post view merge, and I'm going to show you the SQL script for that. This takes a couple minutes to run. All right. So this is the select statement I'm going to run. I'm going to try to retrieve everything from the employees table. And as I mentioned earlier, this was the YAML file that got executed when I created a pod. Um, so it has two images inside, or two containers inside of the pod. One of them is the image of my software, SQL Simulator, and then the other one is an image of SQL Server. I'm using an older version of SQL Server, but you can use a newer version. And as an FYI, the SQL Server, this is an official image from Microsoft. So they allow you to create as many of these containers as you want, and it does that. There's no licensing fee associated with it. Now, the version of SQL Server that's being run is like the developer version, and so, but I believe this should be good enough for most use cases. Okay, so we check this out again, and we see now we got a result that said the sensitive data constraint SSN is violated. Try to retrieve more than the allowed amount of 1. Okay, so now that developer knows that, okay, I can't retrieve more than that. So so you need to make a change to your SQL script, so that it only retrieves 1 at a time. And then I'm going to reload the SQL script. Oh, let me delete this and reload it. Okay. And then I'm going to run it again. And this is going to take a couple minutes. Let's see. While that's running, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions, although there was a little bit of joking about the no Java username.
Oh,
The follow up of, you didn't want to say yes, Scala?
yeah, yeah. So, okay, great. So now we see that line number 1, the SQL was okay, and it built everything. So let's start up a SQL Server Management. Okay, now normally 127.0.0.1 is normally like the local computer, but because I'm port forwarding, it's going to forward that connection over to the pod itself. So I'm going to log in. Let me go to the connection information, password. Okay, so it created the database, which is called appprod. And we go to tables. Now, the script has one table that it referenced, but as you can see here, there are actually 2 tables that were built. And the reason for that is because there was a foreign key from the employee table to payroll table. And so this tool will take into account any foreign keys you have. And so it's gonna rebuild everything that needs to be built in the pod. So you don't have to like specify a foreign key, it's going to build it for you, and it's only going to copy that record from production, the single record from production to the appropriate tables, or however many records are met by or in your where clause. So I just want to point that out. So as we can see, it built those two. All right. So now there's one more thing I'll show you, and then that'll be the end of the presentation. So in this next demo, hold on one second. I'm gonna go ahead and put the files in here and then run them. We're gonna do that. Okay, so with this, you wanna see like what would happen if two developers were trying to run a SQL script to update a database. So you have developer A, and this is the SQL script that they're running, and then you have developer B trying to run this SQL script. And so what you want to try to determine is, okay, if I run these scripts, is it going to cause a problem? And so let's see if it's done. Okay, great. So developer A's script, line 1, the results are the SQL was fine. Developer B, it gave this error. It said column name or number of supplied value does not match the table definition. Does anybody know why it got that error? So this is developer A's SQL, and this is developer B. Let me try this. Okay. So developer B is in this one and developer A is this one. So developer A's script ran first and then developer B's script ran. And so running those two together did cause a problem. Kevin, you care to give it a stab if we don't have anybody commenting?
So we have nobody who's able to answer it in chat, and Mike may be trying to answer if they altered. So it seems like it might be an order of operations problem, because you're inserting into dbo.plastic products, which is expecting a certain schema. And when you have these new columns of effective start date, effective end date, if they're not in the plastic products table definition, then your insertion is going to fail because you have a select star.
Right. Yeah, that's it. So essentially, like what Kevin was saying, and so now just imagine if you would have run this in production, right? Two developers not really talking to each other, and they run something in production, and then this is what you get. So with this, because it set everything up for you, you were able to avoid this. Now, conversely, if you ran them in different orders, the first one will go through with no problem, and then the second one, they both go through. So like you mentioned, it's the order of operation. So that's also important whenever you're running these SQL scripts, is to make sure you're running them in the correct order. Okay, great. Well, that's all I have for today. I'm gonna I just got one more slide here. Let's see. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for coming out today, and really appreciate you guys giving me time. If you have any feedback, if there was something I presented that you felt like might be a problem, maybe there's something I overlooked, something I'm not thinking about, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to thank Kevin and his group for giving me the time to present to you guys today. And I really appreciate everything you guys have done for me. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Weston. And so if people want to try this out, maybe as it gets further along and you're ready for people to try it, what would be the best way to do that?
Oh, let me put my contact information back up. So you can just email me um, at support@tribalknowledge.tech. And so it's going to be available in the next 3 weeks on Microsoft Azure. So you would just need to contact me and give me your, I think it's like your account ID is like a long GUID string. So if you send me that, I'm able to basically set up a private offer for you that's free. So so yeah, so just email me or you can call me, and we can set that up for you, or I can set that up for you. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So it looks like no questions in chat. Want to say thank you so much for the presentation. And looks like we're going to be wrapping things up this evening. So thank you again, Weston, for coming out here. Remember, everybody, the next TriPass meeting is going to be in 2 weeks. That's our next advanced DBA meeting, October 10th, main meeting on the 17th, and data science business intelligence on the 24th. We'll have all those posted on Meetup, meetup.com/TriPass. We'll have those posted probably in the next week or so. So until we see each other at a future meeting or wherever, everyone, take care.